Hello and welcome back to the JB Cast JB podcast, or maybe it's your first time. Welcome. This is episode 32. It's the second half of our interview, our chat that we had with Luke Tulloch. If you didn't hear that one, go back to episode 31, have a listen. This episode jumps straight into where we left off. Luke's background is in neuroscience and bodybuilding and nutrition, and he's got a lot of cool things to say in this interview. So go back and have a listen. He's a coach himself here in Sydney too. Before we get started though, our gym here is in Botany. Quick plug for us. We've got a really cool community down here. Joe, Tiora and myself, we've got a really great group of coaches. We're building strong and mobile humans down here at 15 Underwood Avenue. Come by and have a visit. If you want to reach out, you need some help, you can go to junglebrothers.com and get in touch with us there. And also check out our social media. Follow us there. Enjoy this chat with Luke Tulloch.
This one's a little bit close for me, and a friend of mine from Jiu-Jitsu asked this, but is Jiu-Jitsu the sport, and I'm guessing you're somewhat familiar with it?
Yep.
Is it primarily an anaerobic or an aerobic activity?
Yep.
Which I guess we can kind of figure that out. But based on your response to that, how is that energy system reliant on carbohydrates?
Yep. Okay.
So say like in a thing with jiu-jitsu, you get a lot of people that are like into fads and like into like Wim Hof and like keto and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So you get all these dudes that are doing jiu-jitsu and then they're eating high fat.
Yeah.
And they usually fucking struggle.
Yep. Totally. So, it's mostly anaerobic. So any activity has a contribution from both aerobic and anaerobic processes to give you energy. It's just the ratios of those change. Higher intensity stuff like lifting weights, doing jiu-jitsu, most team sports, very reliant on anaerobic forms of generating energy. And here's why. Our basic sort of currency of energy in the body is something called ATP. And what happens with ATP is it's got what we call high energy phosphate groups. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So there's 3 phosphates. And those are sort of like, they're potential energy, they're stored energy. If you think about a ball sitting at the top of a hill, just before you push it down, that's stored potential energy. As soon as you give it a nudge and it starts rolling, it's kinetic energy. Now, we have to get that ball back to the top of the hill. So what happens is ATP, when it releases energy, pops off one of those high phosphate groups. And once that's gone, we now have got ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So we've gone from 3 phosphates to 2 phosphates. So the whole goal of what we're trying to do is stick another phosphate group back on ADP so that we can get ATP back again. We don't have very much ATP stored in our body, but we go through something like 60 kilos of it a day.
60 kilos of it a day?
Yep.
Right.
So we're constantly regenerating it and popping off phosphate groups again and then sticking that phosphate back on.
Right.
And that's how we move energy around the body.
Yeah.
So our metabolism, our energy systems are designed to basically regenerate our ATP once it starts running out. Now, we can use our macronutrients that we eat, our carbohydrate or our fat or our protein as well, to regenerate ATP. Unfortunately, using fat is a very slow process. We get more ATP out of it, but it takes much longer to do. So whenever you're doing a high intensity exercise where you're spending a lot of energy very fast, the metabolic pathway that regenerates ATP using fat and oxygen just can't keep up, which means we have to use glucose. We have to go through glycolysis. Glycolysis doesn't give us very much ATP, but it does it really, really, really quickly. That's why we need glucose when we're doing these high intensity types of sports, right? Now, you can get away with basically relying more on fats if you're doing something that's quite low intensity. You can do that for sure.
Low intensity being an endurance event?
Even? Yeah, but even in endurance events, there are times where you're not trying to just finish, you're trying to go as fast as possible, right?
Yeah.
So like, let me ask you a question. If you wanted to finish a marathon, would it be better to do it at 10 Ks an hour or 18 Ks an hour if you had to run the whole thing? It'd be 18 Ks an hour, right? Yeah, guess what? That's like as fast as a commercial gym's treadmill goes, and that's marathon runs at the elite level run faster than that.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're using very anaerobic processes at that point. Okay. So they need glucose. There's going to be times when you need to run up a hill. There's going to be times when you need to surge ahead and beat someone at the line. You need carbohydrate for that. There's something else not going to go into because it's quite heavy on the biochem stuff. But basically, to burn fat, you need some of the intermediaries that come from glycolysis. So glycolysis actually makes burning fat possible, which means you sometimes hear this phrase that fats burn in the flame of carbohydrate. So you actually need carbohydrate around to burn fat. If you don't eat it, you generate it from the glycerol molecules, which are part of fatty acids, and you generate it from amino acids as well. So your body will make glucose so that it can burn fat. It's needed.
Yeah, okay. Is that gluconeogenesis?
Gluconeogenesis,
When it comes from protein?
Making new glucose is what it means. Yeah,
Sick.
exactly. Yeah, that happens in the liver. So basically, no matter what your sport is, if you want to compete at the highest possible intensity, you need a certain amount of dietary carbohydrate. And especially sports where essentially the aerobic side of things is very, very low, like jiu-jitsu, you need carbohydrates to perform at your absolute best because you simply can't produce energy fast enough otherwise.
Yeah, okay.
That's basically so we took the long way around, but that's basically why.
Yeah, okay.
So the argument against that you hear all the time, and I've got clients that I have this chat with, and you read it on the internet, is it the whole ketones thing?
Yep.
So can you give us your thoughts on keto and?
Yeah, for sure. So, the production of ketone bodies is what happens when you don't have enough carbohydrate around. So your brain still needs a certain amount of glucose. I think off the top of my head, like 20% of its energy requirements come from glucose no matter what. So your body will make more glucose if it doesn't get that. Some of that, the processes in your body can still run on ketones, which are made from fatty acids. They can still do that. But there's no reason to believe, based on all the evidence we have, that that's any better than using glucose. Glucose is usually the preferred fuel by most tissues, especially the nervous system. So the argument of using ketones and all this sort of stuff, to me, I don't understand what the supposed benefit is supposed to be, because every study that's ever been done has never, ever shown a superiority for using ketones for performance. Some people say that they feel better on a very low carbohydrate diet.
People love saying that these days. I just do better on fats.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's fine, but there's no way that you can physiologically perform to the same level. I'm sorry. Like, you're not a unique physiological snowflake. You run on the same metabolism that every other mammal does on the planet, and there's no way that it's better. You might feel better on it, and it might be because you're removing some foods that don't agree with you. It might be because there's a huge placebo side of things, and I'm not saying placebo to knock it. I think placebo and mentally how you feel about things is super important. It's like why I said you need to enjoy your training. You get more out of it if you enjoy it. It's a placebo effect. So if you like a certain way of eating, it's quite likely that you might perform a little bit better because you like it and because you're into it and it just rings true for you. But physiologically, the carbohydrate intake is always going to outweigh trying to use ketone bodies as a fuel. So I suppose that comes down to an individual choice. Like, I never tell people you have to eat high carbohydrate and low fat. That's my personal preference. You might prefer low carb, and that's totally fine. You can still perform well on that. I just don't think you'll perform at your absolute best if you're looking to squeeze every last drop out of your performance without having a reasonable carbohydrate load in your diet.
What's your ratios of fat to protein to carb?
I have
generally
a moderate protein approach, moderate in the bodybuilding world. I take it by your body weight. So if you take your body weight in kilograms, I eat about 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, which is
still quite high.
It's still quite high compared to the average person. It's high. I think the lowest end you should go is probably 1.4 or probably 1.6 grams per kilo for everybody, just for general health. As far as fat goes, I eat really low fat. I just feel better on it, and I prefer eating that way personally. until I get to the ice cream and the fried chicken.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I actually have to try to get in more fat most of the time. So the lowest I would ever go with people is about 0.5 grams of fat per kilo of body weight, but that's very low, and that's probably roughly what I eat. For most people, it would be 0.7 to 1 gram of fat, and then the rest would be filled out with carbohydrates, which could be anything from like 100 grams of carbs per day. I eat about 450 grams of carbs a day. So
450.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. But that's, my ceiling for calories, again, I'm eating about 3,500 calories a day and maintaining my weight at 93.5, 94 at the moment. Previously when I've tried to maintain my weight at like 98 kilos when I was training a lot, I was having to eat well over 4,000 calories a day. And so then my carbohydrates are like 600 grams a day. So this is it's a lot of like rice and oats.
I watched on YouTube. I started watching it. It was Hafthor Bjornsson.
Oh yeah, insanity.
Yeah, it was him and his coach from the Sebastian.
Yes, Baz.
Base gym.
Is that a bodybuilder?
Powerlifter.
He's a powerlifter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very strong individual.
You know Hafthor, right? Mm-hmm. Hafthor's the mountain from Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
But it was a cool, it wasn't a great video, but it was Sebastian's following him for the day and trying to match every meal that he eats.
Mate.
So he turns up his house in the morning and he's like, yeah, I've had the same breakfast every day for 10 years. And it's like 6 fried eggs in butter, 6 rashers of bacon, big glass of fruit juice, and then like a massive bowl of porridge. And it actually wasn't that insane, right? Like I was like, if I had to do it, I could probably get through it. Yeah. But then it's like 2 hours later, he's doing it.
But then, yeah, exactly.
2 hours later.
He does that 7 times a day.
Yeah, and he's like, I haven't had a day without eggs for like 10, 15 years. I can't even remember,
It's wild. Like a lot of those guys say that easily the hardest thing about what they do is eating. Because they just got to, like you said, it's just insanity.
Fuck, it's discipline, huh?
Must be tough on the body.
Dude, yeah, totally. It's got to be tough.
They don't last long,
system.
right?
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Yeah.
Did you have something, T-Bone?
I got heaps of questions.
There's a lot of questions. We're probably going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes, so why don't you go?
Well, look, I got...
There's too much good stuff to go into.
Look, I'm happy to keep going if you want.
Can we go over?
We can go over.
Even if you want to chop it up for another ep or something, I'm happy to keep going.
All right, yeah, let's push it.
Yeah.
My man.
Well, okay, on that note, obviously you have a knack for accumulating knowledge relative to your specialisation, and the area that you specialise in, it's full of perspectives and opinions and skewed surveys, celebrity authorities.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably not another discipline that has as much information that you have to sort through out there. What steps do you take to filter through the junk and just avoid becoming a victim to confirmation bias yourself, given the fact that there's going to be stuff that you feel you're attached to?
Yeah, that is a sick question, man. That's a good question. For me, that's why I wanted to go back to uni. That's why I wanted to learn some of the basic chemistry and biology and stuff, because that way I can logically say, hey, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like the keto thing for me was a non-starter from the beginning, because I knew what the metabolic process is to regenerate ATP. But a lot of people don't have that knowledge, and so it's very easy for them to go, oh, well, XYZ is doing it, and they look great, and they say it's awesome, and it seems to make sense, so I'll do it. But for me, I was always like, well, it doesn't make any sense. Of course they're not going to perform as well. Like, you don't even need to do the studies. Like, here's how it works, sort of thing. We've known that for a long time. So for me, it was like getting that basic knowledge really helped me sharpen the bullshit detector. And that's what I wanted to provide with trainers by doing my education stuff. Is like, well, here's the principles. If stuff doesn't fit into the principle, like it's probably not there. But to be perfectly honest, I also really feel that there's maybe going to make me sound like a bit of an asshole, but I think there's a massive lack of critical thinking and logic in general by the general public and by trainers and that kind of thing in particular. A lot of shit you don't even need to have any scientific knowledge about to realize that it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'll give you an example. Genetically modified foods. I'm going to probably cop flack for this, and I don't give a fuck. Come at me. So genetically modified foods. if someone goes in and changes one gene in a plant, tests it for safety, passes safety regulations, and then you go and eat it, how is that worse than when we mate plants together and we have their entirety of their genome smashing together in a completely uncontrolled manner, and we have no idea what the fuck's coming out the other end, like we've done for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years? Apples don't look the same as they did 100 years ago, people, because we breed them. What happens when you breed them? You smash the entire genome together of those two plants, and you have no idea what the fuck's coming out the other end. Absolutely no idea. So to me, logically speaking, if you have a controlled environment where you're altering one gene and then testing it for safety and then putting it out to the public and you're eating that, that is 1 billion times removed from traditional methods of breeding animals, of breeding plants, and it's way safer. So to me, if you use that sort of logic, then it's kind of, again, it's a bit of a non-starter, and there's this like irrational fear around GMO. And like, I'm not saying we shouldn't test. I'm not saying it could be dangerous in the wrong hands and all this type of stuff. Absolutely, it should be tested and it should be, you know, really under wraps and done very carefully. But honestly, it's very far removed from just traditional breeding, which is potentially, if you're going along those lines, way more dangerous because of the unknown, right? So that's kind of where I come in, is like, if you have some more critical thinking skills and you understand logic and how to debate a little bit better, then I think you can learn a lot better. And so to your question of how do I deal with my own personal biases, everybody's going to, I think, firstly recognizing that you have biases and that nobody is objective. It doesn't matter who you are, you always have some subjective dog in the fight. But then being open-minded and taking the stance that if I change my mind, it's a good thing. If you don't change your mind, it means obviously you're not learning. You're not refining your ideas. Part of the scientific method is actually that we update our ideas and our models based on the evidence that's presented to us. And so I try and take that into everything that I do. I'm happy to change my mind if I genuinely think that it needs changing and if there's evidence for it. And I celebrate the fact that when I do change my mind, I've discovered something new for myself and I've gotten better.
You're evolving.
And you're evolving and you're going to get better.
That's a good point, because I'm guessing, sorry to jump in the scientific field, it's very easy to, say you commit a large part of your time, you take a couple of years to study fats and how they're really beneficial for the body and how, you know, and then you're going deep down that rabbit hole, and then it's easy for you to become attached to that thing then passionate about that thing. 100%. And then you have this confirmation bias, right?
That's the thing, yeah. You're always going to have that, and that's the thing, you know, especially like if I've put my ass on the line out there and said, you know, what I just said about the GMO foods, if we get evidence in the next 10 years that says completely otherwise, I look like a big fucking idiot right now, right? I just look like the biggest idiot on the planet. And it's going to be really hard for me to say, well, actually, you know, that's completely wrong, and all the information I put out before and I sold to you was wrong. And I still feel awkward about some of the shit I've told my clients in the past, where I'm like, this is 100% how it is, man, and this is what you got to do, and you got to buy this supplement, you got to use that. And now I cringe thinking, imagine if those people that I worked with come back and still saw what I was saying now. They'd be like, that motherfucker told me the wrong thing. But it's just how it is, you know.
It's real.
It's how it is. But you're right, you have this investment in that sort of stuff. And it's like it's both the brilliance of the modern world and the downfall is that you have these specializations. If we didn't have the specialization, we wouldn't know all the stuff we knew today. We wouldn't have all the incredible technology and all of the science that's going on at the moment. But at the same time, there's a massive deficit in trying to bring all of those bits and pieces together to give a better overall picture and to try and put it all together into something that's practical for people to use. So it's hard, right?
And you talk about, so basing what you prescribe on evidence-based science.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you would consider yourself a scientist, do you make this a black and white rule for yourself? Are you experimenting with your pool of clients at the same time, taking data from that and then potentially going against the grain? Or
yeah, totally. I think so. People. And you'll find this a lot. Sometimes I cringe to call myself evidence-based because a lot of the evidence-based people are actually not that evidence-based. When they say evidence-based, they mean, if there wasn't a study done on it, I'm not interested in it. And that's ridiculous, man. That is so stupid. Evidence-based means that I take into account all of the available evidence and I make my decisions based on the overall balance of that evidence. What constitutes evidence? Anecdote? Totally. Expert opinion? Yes. Studies? Yes. Different kinds of studies? Yes. Now, they have different weightings. Like if there's a study on something versus the opinion of like a gym bro, okay, I'm going to go with the study on this one, but it doesn't mean that the opinion and the anecdote of the gym bro is invalid. It's still a form of evidence. You still got to take it into account. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier on...
especially if that gym bro is like someone who's been around for a long time.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, if there's a jack
really loves their
dude...
stuff.
Yeah, if there's a jack dude that's done something that's worked really well for him and he tells me about it, I'm going to listen. Of course I'm going to listen. The dude's jacked. Obviously, something he's doing is working, right? You might not know why, but it might be something there.
Benchies. You need benchies 3 days a week.
That's it.
That's what I remember the jack dude told me when I started training at the gym. Mate, you just need benchies. 3 days a week, bench press. Mate, your chest will grow.
Well, that's it, right? There's always some knowledge in that, you know? Like there's always a kernel of knowledge. But like it's, you know, like I said earlier, it's being aware that there's never going to be a study on the individual in front of you. Like studies are there to eliminate variables so that we can work out how things are working. But when we're in the real world, sorry, all the variables are there. Like, so there's something called internal validity and external validity. So if you have a study that is really watertight and it controls all of the variables, it's highly internally valid, which means I'm trying to work out how X supplement affects Y. I've controlled all the other variables. They're all eating the same. They're moving the same. They're exercising the same. They're sleeping the same, blah, 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 blah. I've controlled everything, which means the results of my study are super accurate. They're great. However, the more you do that, which is great for a study, the less externally valid it is. Externally valid being the real world.
The bigger lab.
When nothing's controlled. So you have this contrast of like, well, okay, you can make something closer to real. Like you often hear people say when a study comes out, well, nobody does it like that. Why did they set up the study that way? Yeah. Because they're trying to answer and isolate a really specific question. That's why.
Yeah.
And if you make it more externally valid, it means the internal validity of the study suffers. So you got this seesaw. And so you always got to try and take that into account and be like, well, every study done is not my client. It's not me. I could be anywhere on that spectrum. I have a billion other factors to think about and variables. So you got to interpret. You got to take the evidence on a whole and interpret and play with it. And like I said, if you've got principles, like we know, so mechanical tension and training volume for our hypertrophy, it's like, shit, man, how many programs can you come up with that satisfy those? It's literally endless. It's literally endless. So, you know, I can't tell you that training a certain way is wrong if you're satisfying those and you've got a reason to justify it, you know. They've never done a study on it, so.
How do you feel when you read a book like The 4-Hour Body?
Yeah.
You know, like a famous book written by Tim Ferriss, for anyone that doesn't know. And it's a cool read.
Yeah.
But he basically summarizes all of these, you know, he's like, this is the way to build muscle.
Yeah.
And you know, and this is the way to do whatever.
Do you know what? I think things like that, if we circle back to like, there's stuff that's optimal, but adherence and consistency will beat it all. It could be the shittest program on the planet, but if you actually do it, it's still better than the best program on the planet that you never did.
Yeah.
So that's the way I view it. It's like if people are buying into it and they're like, fuck yeah, man, this is awesome. I'm going to do it and I'm going to be into it. Like that's better than if I came along and said, well, actually that's not optimal. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm not very excited about doing this.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he's presenting like, this is the optimal thing. And it's like, well, yeah.
But he's selling it to people and they're going to do it. So
then it works.
So then it works,
yeah.
You know, and so like that's the advantage of that. I just feel that, you know, people need to stay open-minded about stuff, and there's never a sort of one optimal situation because it's a fluctuating soup of variables, our lives that we live, you know.
Yes.
One thing that's great for you now is not necessarily going to be great for you in 6 months' time or whatever it is. But, you know, on that point, there are some people that I think are scum that do stuff like that. So
you want to call anyone out?
Gary Taubes.
Gary Taubes.
Had that ready to go.
Who's that?
So he wrote Good Calories, Bad Calories.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He basically has this big thing about the insulin hypothesis of obesity. And basically, insulin is a hormone that helps your body store fat. And when insulin is high, it suppresses fat burning. That's all true. insulin is increased the most when you eat carbohydrates. So basically, he extended that line of logic and said, you've got to cut out carbs to lose fat. Now, the amount of evidence against that is tremendous. If I listed all the studies here, we'd be here all afternoon. But there's in excess of 50 studies that have directly proven that to be false. And Gary's not an idiot, right? He has been to some of the best universities in the US. He's had debates with some of the highest profile people in my world over this sort of thing. And he repeatedly comes up short and basically denies and then just sticks to his story. Now, Gary even created a organization where they wanted to fund a study that directly looked at some of this stuff. It was called Neuroscience, and he basically helped design the study. He helped fund it. He organized the person who was going to take care of it, Kevin Hall, who's a very, very bright bloke, set up a very good series of studies. And they looked at it and it disproved Gary's hypothesis. And Gary was asked about this, and in advance they said, you know, if your studies that Neuroscience is funding come up and say that your hypothesis is wrong, will you change your mind? And he said no. So someone like Gary is an absolute scumbag. He's a fucking scumbag and he's a liar. So when people are writing books like that and they're not willing to change their minds, yeah, I'm happy I'm happy to call them scumbags and say that's wrong. Someone like Tim Ferriss, I don't believe has that intention behind what he's writing.
He's just curating info.
He's curating info and he's selling it to people in a presentable package. But I don't think he would ever say, you know, this is the only way to do things and I'm never going to change my mind on it. He's not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
When did he write that book, Gaza?
It was quite a few years ago, and then he wrote a follow-up called Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It, which was basically just the same thing. You know, so yeah.
So let's say...
Good call out, by the way. Good call out.
I call him out all the time in my seminars.
Yeah, nice. That's funny.
For the average Joe or the weekend warrior, somebody who wants to delve deeper into these areas, where are the good resources then?
The best resources are probably
besides your own web.
Yeah, my own stuff.
What do you got? You got a website and a Instagram?
Yeah, most of my stuff is on my Instagram. I've got a big project that I'm announcing very, very soon. That's going to be
can you talk about
very
that?
accessible. Yeah, I might talk about it actually. This is the
Breaking
first
news.
time I'm publicly announcing it. Yeah, I'm putting together a membership site. The membership site's going to be available pretty soon and it's going to be pretty cheap. I just want it to be accessible. I want good information to be accessible to people. Cool. You know, so in there's going to be topics like we're talking about, monthly topics on things like inflammation, oxidative stress, hormones, all of this type of stuff that people have questions about. There's information on how to structure eating and training programs. There are monthly Q&As with myself, and then there's also like expert interviews and all that sort of stuff. So I'm getting a few bright people that I know to write like, well, this is how I program for muscle growth and strength, and this is how I do a comp prep or whatever.
Is this for coaches?
It's for everybody.
Everybody.
Yep. So
Well,
I've kind of
that's
moved
exciting.
from the coaching side to everybody. I think everybody will benefit from it. So that's
Cool.
great, but I also think that you need to find an expert that you trust, but then you need to understand that expert is not going to be right all the time. I'm not right all the time. There's going to be stuff that you disagree with me on some things, but there's going to be other stuff that you might emphatically agree with on others. And that's everybody in my circle. There's stuff that like, you know, 90% of what they say, I'm on board with it, man, and I'll trust this guy because I know his information is good. But there might be 10% of stuff that I'm like, yeah, I don't really rate that. But you have to understand that you're separating their work from the person themselves as well. So I think if you try and find a good expert, like generally speaking in this field, people like that have a lot of integrity are people like Greg Nuckols, Eric Helms, people along those lines I think are really good for general training and nutrition information. And I follow them on social media. They put out a lot of good info. Their podcasts are really good. There's other people that put out really good information like Lyle McDonald is fantastic, but he's an absolute dick. However, many people are able to separate his personality from his work. His work is brilliant. His personality is terrible. He's a child. You know, so I think just finding someone that you resonate with and you feel like you can trust is important, but then also understand that they're not going to be right all the time. And those are probably the best resources.
That's a powerful thing, right? To be able to say, yeah, I was wrong about that, or I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know is a big one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you ever listen to there was a podcast that Joe Rogan did where he had two guys on. One was debating more of a basic balance of nutrients. So carbohydrates, fat, protein, and the other guy was completely anti-carb.
I think it was Dom D'Agostino and Lane Norton.
Yes.
You're talking about. I didn't actually listen to that. I find those very frustrating to listen to.
It was the shittest podcast.
It's horrible.
But
it's a lot of it is like semantics and back and forth like that, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's just really interesting because you're like, well, I mean, it's interesting on a couple of levels. One, it's like, wow, how can this be so fucking confusing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we really not know? But I guess the bigger question around that, and this is really relevant to our listeners, because people listen to that shit, right? So they listen and they're like, oh man, I've heard a lot of people mention to me, oh man, Dom D'Agostino, like you watch his stuff, he's great. And then, I get people mentioning names of people I've never heard of, but they're obviously influenced by these people. How is it that we still don't know? And how is it that these things this nutrition thing is so murky at those extreme ends?
Do you know what? I think the biggest issue is just context. I really do. Because in many, like I said, there's so many variables when it comes to people with their lives, their genetics, their, what they do, that them in that particular moment. Like I said, not everything's going to be perfect for you forever. I think that's really the biggest issue, is that people miss out on the context. Like if we talked about a ketogenic diet, like in some contexts, I would be 100% up for you using a ketogenic diet. If you were competitive BJJer, I wouldn't be very keen on that. I'd be pretty against it. So it can work. It just depends on the situation and the context. It depends on the person. And I think that's really where we're stumbling, is that, someone will say, well, I tried X, Y, and Z and it didn't work. Therefore, I think eating low carb is better because it worked well for me. And it's like, contextually, it probably worked better for you because it was easier for you to control your calories that way. And that's why it worked. But it wasn't probably because of what you thought it was. So I think that's kind of the big stumbling block, because there's just too many variables to try and again, give an individual recommendation for everybody out of research. I think we do know a fair bit, but it's just one of those things where I think the practicality sometimes gets lost as well,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What's actually going to be applicable
in
your life?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Keto's a great example. It's fucking hard to get your hands on that much fat, and it's expensive to buy 16 avocados a day.
Yeah, look, I mean, and some people love it. I think some people love those kind of diets, and I used to be very paleo-oriented because it was just like I said, it's a line in the sand. It's like, you can't cross that line. I'm sorry. That has carbohydrates in it. Cool, I'm not eating it. That's easy, conceptually.
Yeah.
It's much harder to kind of be like, well, you can eat literally anything you want, but then you got to weigh it first and work out how many calories in it and all this shit. And some people just go, fuck, man, it's easier when I just had the rule of like, is it processed or in a box and I'm not allowed to eat it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking of boxes and processes,
Ooh.
you mentioned supplements, prescribing supplements to clients many years ago. Now they're saying, hey, what the fuck? Have you changed your mind on certain things? And talk about your approach to supplements. And obviously there's stuff out there that works potentially, and then there's a whole bunch of shit that doesn't.
Yep.
So let's say I'm new to bodybuilding and I walk into ASC. Is it ASC? ASN, and I'm like, it's like fucking lolly shop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All the
And
gains.
every single bottle's got the body of a guy that I want to look like. Where do you start?
Except they got thin necks. Don't forget that.
Thin necks. Except for the jiu-jitsu protein, creatine.
Yeah, you need the Brazilian brand.
I think firstly, most stuff does something. Like if you're going to take something and put it in your body, it's going to do something. The issue is whether it's much that it's doing, whether it's a significant amount, and then what's the risk to reward ratio of that. Now, I include the cost of the supplement, the physical price of the supplement, as part of the risk. So if I spend $60 to get something that's going to get me an extra 0.1%, it's improving me, but is it worth $60? Nah, I don't care. I would rather spend the money on something that has a better risk to reward ratio, where maybe I get a little bit more out of it. So there is some stuff that I feel is cheap and effective and has basically minimal side effects, but gets you a reasonable amount of bang for your buck. There's other stuff that I think works, but is just too expensive to even consider, in my personal opinion. So let me give you some examples. Stuff like creatine, very well researched, does a fair bit, super cheap, basically no side effects aside from a bit of weight gain.
Oh, that's not a side effect.
Not a problem with that.
Yeah. But you know what's funny? Like, I get tons of people message me when they're busy dieting or they're about to start dieting. They're like, should I take creatine? You seem to like creatine. I'm like, no, because it's going to fuck up your weight data. Just wait till you're like weight stable and then take some, and then you can.
Is that a water retaining?
Yeah, it basically
property,
sucks water into the muscles. So you might put on 1 kilo or 2 maybe.
Decent.
Yeah, but that's obviously going to muck up your weight data. If you're trying to weigh yourself every day to see if you're losing fat, it's going to fuck that up. So wait till your weight's stable to use it. So, that is so cheap, but it's like, if you bought it and you bought 1 kilo of it and you started using it and then you kind of forgot about it or you didn't want to take it anymore, it's like no loss. It's like $15 that you've lost. So who cares? Something like vitamin D as well. Super cheap, associated with a lot of things. If your vitamin D level is low, fuck yeah, I'd be taking that. Damn straight I would be. So things like that are super basic, that have got a fair bit of different associations with them that are cheap, to me, I'm all about. Other stuff I feel is just a little bit of a waste of money. So again, if I'm going to get even 1% out of it, but I have to spend $100 a week on it or $50 a week, I don't feel that's worth it, because I could take that $50 and I could spend that on better quality food, more vegetables. I could put it towards coaching, which I get more out of.
Yeah.
I even think putting it to $50 towards your hobby that gives you a bit more stress relief is probably going to be a better investment. You know what I mean? So you have to make that judgment. Like, the supplements are all mostly going to do something. They're all mostly going to work, but it all depends on whether the risk to reward ratio is there. And there's very, very few supplements that satisfy that.
So we got creatine, vitamin D, protein
D3.
powder.
I like protein powder. You don't have to have it. I like it because it's convenient. It helps me bump up my protein intake at various meals. So to give you an example, I like mixing it into things like oats. I like mixing it into yogurt. And that bumps up the protein of a meal that is otherwise going to be mostly carbohydrate. It's obviously convenient around training. So I think it's a great investment, personally. I don't buy anything expensive. I buy whey protein concentrate. I buy it in bulk from an online retailer like Bulk Nutrients or VPA or whatever your preferred one is. And it costs me something like, for 5 kilos, it cost me like $98 or something like that. And that's going to last me for
How many
ages.
kilos?
5 kilos.
Is whey protein concentrate
It's a cheaper one.
Yeah, right. Isolate is the more...
It's the more expensive one.
Yeah, right.
It's got a few less grams of fat in it, the isolate, and a few, like maybe 1 less gram of carbs or whatever. It's like a little bit less calorie dense, but that doesn't matter to me at all.
Yeah.
And you end up paying $10 a kilo more. So for me, that's not worth it. The risk to reward ratio, not good for me. WPC, great. So protein powder, I'm totally up for. What else is there?
Do you do carb supplements?
Nah.
Just eat carbs?
Eat carbs.
Preferred carb?
Look, here's the thing, is that if you're replacing whole foods with supplements, you're not going to get the most out of it, because the whole food comes with an entire matrix of nutrients that work synergistically together. So I could have a carbohydrate powder and get 100 grams of carbs, but if I ate 100 grams of carbs from oats, I'm getting all of the vitamins and minerals in the oats. I'm getting fiber. I'm getting enjoyment from the mouthfeel and the fact that I get to eat a nice, delicious meal, because I really like oats. So all of those are factors that are way in favor of the oat, 100 grams of carbs from oats, way in favor. Even though, like, body comp wise, and our energy balance wise, it's the same. If we're talking about practical side of things, they're not really the same, are they? So the other thing I would probably mention is like a multivitamin. A lot of people kind of a fan of a multivitamin. Now, the data, if we look at the research for multivitamins, is not great. Like, there's no association with long-term health and taking a multivitamin or anything like that. But a lot of the people that I deal with are dieting quite a lot. And if you're in a big deficit and you're not eating as much food, guess what? You're not availing yourself to as many nutrients. Now, getting nutrients from whole foods, like I just mentioned, always better because they come in a big matrix of nutrients that work synergistically together. So taking a multivitamin does not provide you with that. However, if you're eating much less food and therefore your volume of food is going down, you're not availing yourself to as many nutrients, and then using a multi might make sense in that case. So something like that I think is probably fine.
Yeah.
But again, it's not something that I just take willy-nilly all the time, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you can justify one thing, you can justify a million other things. So for me, it's like if I've got a few that work well for me, that's cool. The other thing that I take is melatonin because sleep is extremely important. I think there's more evidence coming out now about chronicity, or like your circadian rhythmicity and you know when you're eating and when you're sleeping and all that type of stuff, which could be something that's pretty big in the next couple of years. But I go to bed very early. So I go to bed at 8 p.m. because I got to get up at 4 to train people. So for me, especially in summer, when the sun's still up, when I'm trying to go to bed, okay, I'm going to take some melatonin to help me sleep. Do you have to take it? No. Can a good nighttime routine and less light exposure be just as good, or if not better? Yes. But I take
Works
melatonin.
for you.
Yeah, I take melatonin, especially in summer when I'm exposed to more light when I'm trying to go to bed.
And that's and I mean, there's different, like you can get the the homeopathic melatonin, which kind of doesn't do shit, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Or you can get the actual melatonin, which is the hormone.
So in Australia and New Zealand, those are prescription only, the actual melatonin, but you can order it from overseas and it's fine. It's no problem. I do it all the time.
Yeah, nice.
And that's cheap. There's no side effects, basically. If you take a bit too much, you might feel a bit groggy the next morning, but otherwise, a lot of health benefits associated with
I'm going to
better
get me some
sleep.
of that because I find it fucking hard to get to bed early.
Yeah, dude.
I find it hard all the time, but summer in particular.
It's honestly something that helps me a lot. So I like using that.
When you talk about creatine and even protein, and there's a lot of different brands of both.
Yeah.
And then you get these concoctions with other things in there that they kind of almost use as a marketing tool to tell you that their mix is more potent because they've added some other filler. Are you looking for like when you look for something like this, are you looking for the purest form of the active ingredient, or do you want to head towards the ones that are mixed a little? Or?
Generally speaking, you kind of want the purer form. So to give you an example, there's tons of different types of creatine that have come out.
Micronized.
But the old traditional creatine monohydrate, it's the cheapest one, works the best.
Really?
Yeah. So you can buy creatine, Crealkaline, and all these different kinds, but the basic creatine monohydrate works the best and it's the cheapest. It's got the most track record behind it in the research. So there's a big problem with the supplement industry, and this is another reason why I don't like using supplements, is because you actually don't know what's in it.
Yeah.
There's a really cool website called labdoor.com, and what they do is they independently take supplements and they test them and they check if the actual ingredients that are listed on the label are on there, if there's anything else, and what are the concentrations. And it varies wildly. There is no supplement that they've tested so far that is 100% accurate. None of them. So you actually don't really know.
There is cross-contamination and that sort of thing?
There's just no regulation on it.
Right.
Very little regulation.
Is it because it's not because companies are necessarily trying to be unethical?
I don't think so. I think there's various tolerances, right? So they might say, look, we're happy if the concentration is between X and Y, then it's okay. But it doesn't get followed up on very much, I don't think. Like, I don't think it's very strictly regulated. So the industry, unfortunately, is not regulated to the point where you can be absolutely guaranteed that every brand that says creatine on it is going to have exactly what it says in it. It might have some other stuff. It might not have some of the active ingredients that it says, which is why, again, buying blends of things, you don't know for sure that that's going to be in there. And that's a big problem. And I don't know there's no way around that. So if you don't know what you're putting in your body, don't take it, is my stance. So some basic supplements that are cheap to produce, where they're unlikely to cut corners, I'm happy to take. But to give you an example, like the multi problem, it's like you don't actually, there's like, could be 20 or 30 ingredients in there. And you don't know exactly what the concentrations of all of those are. You don't know what the amounts you're taking in through your diet are. So now you're introducing a completely unknown amount of 30 different things into your body. So do you want to be doing that all the time? I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. Now, it's probably going to be harmless. It's probably going to be fine. But I don't like the idea of it, you know, and there's no way of really knowing. So
Especially if you're doing it for a long time.
Exactly. So I actually have a general practice of just not taking supplements every now and then. So if a multi says take 2 pills every day, if I'm going to take the multi, I might do 2 pills every day for 2 weeks, and then for a month I don't use it, or for 2 weeks I don't use it. Or I might do 1 pill every day, right? But I try and like not use some supplements frequently. I'll just stop using them. You know, so I do use tools like Labdoor and stuff, but there's so much out there on the market that you can't look at every brand and every bottle that comes out. It's hard, man. So I think that's a big problem with the supplement industry, and another reason why it's probably, you know, that risk to reward ratio is probably a little bit skewed on a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you talk on, you know, something that comes about with the macro, or, you know, the macronutrient kind of approach? So keeping track of your protein, fat, and carbs and whatnot, and something that I hear from people who kind of don't believe in that approach.
Yeah.
They'll often go back to the micronutrient thing.
Yep.
Could you talk on that, and how, so for someone like yourself, where you obviously have you obviously lean towards the macro thing and it works for you, and, you know, the chicken wings and whatever.
Yeah.
But then how do you ensure that from a micronutrient perspective you're ticking the boxes?
Yeah, that's a super good point. Just because you track your food and because you have macro targets doesn't mean you get to eat like an idiot. Obviously, if all you ever ate was chicken breast or KFC or whatever, like one food item, you're still going to run into issues with nutrient deficiencies and stuff. Now, again, if we look at the hierarchy of importance, it's energy balance first. Okay, so if we're looking to, for example, lose some fat, it doesn't matter where those calories come from, really, as long as you're getting the right amount of calories. If you're eating protein, so the next level up would be macronutrients. What ratios of carbs, fats, and protein are you eating? And the most important one there is protein, because if you don't eat enough protein, you won't preserve muscle mass, and then the weight you lose will come from muscle and not from fat. So you need enough protein. Does it matter where that protein comes from? Well, firstly, we just need to get enough protein. The next level after that is, where are we getting all of our calories from? Where are we getting our protein from? And so you have to satisfy those conditions first, and you will control your body composition if you satisfy those first 2 levels of the hierarchy first. But if you want to maximize health and performance, now you need to go the next level, which is your micronutrition. So yeah, it is super important that you get enough fiber. It is super important that you get variety in your foods, because there are phytonutrients in plant foods and fruits, and many of them we don't even know about yet. We haven't discovered them yet. We don't know what they do. We don't know what ratios we should be using them in, all that sort of stuff, which is the food matrix idea I spoke about before.
Yeah.
Or the nutrient matrix idea. So it doesn't give you license to eat like an idiot. And unfortunately, the if it fits your macro thing kind of turned into that. It kind of turned into people going, like, look how shitty I can eat and still be lean.
Yeah.
Which is dumb. It's so dumb. You know, there's so much more to it than that. So within what I do, which is what I would probably call flexible dieting, it's flexible. It means that on Fridays, the pub around the corner from my house has a chicken wing special, and I like beer, so I'm going to go have a beer and some chicken wings with my mate, and I can fit that into my diet. However, for every other day during the week, I'm eating a variety of fruits and vegetables. I'm eating lean proteins from a variety of sources. I'm making sure I'm getting in enough fiber. You know, I drink mostly water and coffee. Like, so you're still satisfying all of those things to try and get enough micronutrition in as well.
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't give you a license to just eat like an idiot all the time. However, if you did want to stay in shape and you were going to go party for a week or something, like, you could use the same principles and stay in shape and at least limit the damage, and then, you know, start eating normally again with a variety of healthy foods after that. So yeah, I think people have just taken the concept and kind of bastardized it, but it's a more intelligent way of flexibly eating, right? That I like to subscribe to, for sure.
Makes sense.
This is a little bit off topic, but I think there's someone that needs to be mentioned, and that's your wife, Fanny,
Yeah.
who is a well-respected coach in our gym.
Yep.
She's a stretch therapist.
Yeah.
Which seems like it's a world away from what you do.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, is it? And do you guys have conflicting ethos on certain things? And
I think it's not that far away, because a lot of what we're trying to do is cause adaptation in the body, right? Like we spoke a bit about before. If you thought of a bodybuilding movement, the stuff you think of, we mentioned bench presses, right? Stuff like that. Benchies. But really, what are we doing with that? We're putting tension across tissue, and you don't have to do a traditional bodybuilding movement to do that. You know, like there's a reason why a lot of gymnasts are super jacked, because they work close to failure and they put tension across those tissues and they do a certain amount of volume every week. Hell yeah, you can get jacked doing that. You don't have to do bench presses to do that. So I think it's probably closer than a lot of people think in terms of the type of training that we do, because we're just trying to induce an adaptation from the tissue. In terms of ethos, yeah, we're a bit different. Like you can probably tell I'm a little bit more data, numbers oriented, and she's a lot more intuition oriented, I suppose. I was joking because I listened to a podcast on the Tim Ferriss podcast, actually, with Seth Godin.
Oh, yeah. He's cool.
An interesting guy, but he's like into all of this stuff, but he doesn't measure anything. Like he bought a coffee machine that is like top of the line. Like I'm talking, even if you walked into a specialty coffee shop and you saw one of these things, you'd be like, that's the next level. He bought one of those and he roasts his own coffee beans, but he doesn't do the most basic thing that any person making coffee at home should be doing, which is weighing your beans. Because it's a recipe. Like if you use more beans, it's going to be stronger. And he doesn't weigh them.
So
I just told her, he's an interesting guy, but it was like, there's no way I could do that. I couldn't physically make myself be like that. And she was pissing herself because she could do that, no problem.
And you are a coffee guy, right?
Yeah.
So it cuts deep.
When I cook something, I time it when I'm cooking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas most people probably just go by feel, like, oh yeah, it's probably done. No, I time it, you know, and I weigh everything and all that type of thing. So that's what I'm like, whereas she's much more intuition-based. So I think it actually, like, it works well with each other. Yeah, it does complement each other quite well. It's funny like that.
Well, if you were both your way, you could be a really fucking boring couple.
It would be neurotic. It would be neurotic, man.
But if you were both her way, you could also be really boring.
Yeah,
right? It's nice
to
have that mix.
Totally, yeah. It's funny, but I think we understand each other, which is what makes it work. But yeah, I mean, like to answer your question with the training side of things, I actually think it's closer than most people think. Yeah.
You do much stretching yourself?
Yeah, like I'm not super flexible, but I think doing that stuff is quite important to me because I've noticed that I feel better when I do it. So I do at least one what I've done in the past is I've done at least one long stretching session a week where I'll stretch for like an hour and a half and I hold most stretches for like 3 to 5 minutes. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to stretch more frequently to see if that works a bit better. And so at the end of my training sessions, I might spend 10, 15 minutes stretching a few key areas and seeing if that works better or not for me. But yeah, I do stretch. I like that stuff. Nice. Feels good.
Is Juji Mufu a big inspiration for you?
That guy's wild, hey? How wild is that guy?
He's so good.
Yeah, he's crazy.
I feel like he's kind of maybe tapering off a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
he had his
we've reached
moment.
Peak Juji.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, after I saw him doing like splits with 60 kilos in a snatch on a pair of chairs, I was just like, I don't understand how this guy's going to take it up to another level. But then he started lighting fires and shit. And then I was like, oh man, he's going full on.
Yeah, I remember hearing him on a podcast and he was saying it's actually getting really hard.
I bet.
Keep coming up with ideas.
I bet. Far out.
So when are you planning on joining the three of us and becoming a dad?
Oh, dude.
Oh,
Funny's desperate for that.
You can call him a dick if you want.
She's going to be. I almost suspect she's put you up to that. She's got a strong maternal instinct, and I'm a very patient man. So she's slowly wearing me down.
I should say the four of us actually, because Az is a dad as well.
Yeah,
lots of dads here.
Yeah, who knows, man? Soon.
How old are you?
31 this year.
Right on.
Clock's ticking, bro.
Yeah,
that's what she says, but I go, but there's a difference, right? So my dad would have had me when he was 34, 5 maybe. But Funny's mum had her on her 19th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So we've got very different perspectives on that. So yeah, soon, next couple of years.
Oh, awesome.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Hey man, we're gonna wrap it up there.
Cool.
But I wanted to just, you've got a lot of stuff going on. I
Yeah.
know that you run I know you run a mentorship, and I know you also run a group on Facebook for PTs, and you got a lot of cool stuff going on. Could you tell us where people can find you, what you have coming up, and your avenues?
Yeah, for sure. My Instagram is probably the best place because I just pop a little link tree thing in there, and you can kind of access any seminars I'm doing and all my courses and all that sort of stuff there. So that's _Luke Tulloch. So hit me up there. The next seminar I'm doing is in August, 17th and 18th of August. I'm presenting with a real big rig, Jordan Shallow. It's called Systems in Synergy. So that's just a one-off in Melbourne. So if you can come along to that, it might be sold out by now, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be really, really good.
Was it Systems in Synergy?
Yeah, Jordan Shallow is the guy I'm presenting with. He's a bit of a big deal stateside. I've been in the audience of one of his presentations before, and it's sick. So I'm really stoked to have the opportunity to actually present alongside him, which is awesome, really cool. But yeah, other than that, keep an eye out for the membership site, which is coming out pretty soon. I would say maybe next month to 6 weeks, we're going to be live with that sort of thing. Yeah, and if you have any questions, hit me up. Probably Instagram's the easiest way to do that because I spend quite a lot of time on there just answering people's questions.
What is the membership site for coaches or for?
For both.
Yeah, okay.
Both coaches
for
and
clients.
Well, here's the thing. I think honestly, for a lot of people, if you're a massive fitness enthusiast, you probably have a similar knowledge to most coaches. Maybe not the coaching experience. Obviously, you might not be as good a coach, but you probably have the same knowledge as a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
So I kind of think it covers both populations pretty well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. I'm pretty pumped about it. It's just going to be like, because I was producing all these different products and courses and all this stuff, and I was like, fuck, if I could just put it all in one place and have everybody have access to it, that would be cool.
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dude, it's man, you are a wealth of information, and you are and you're I think you're really good at putting it into terms that people can understand.
Hopefully.
Which is a hard thing for someone who has an academic background.
Yeah.
It's been mad having you on today. Thanks for
Loved
making
it.
the time for us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Luke.
Anytime.
Thanks, Luke.
Loved it.
Definitely going to be listening back to this one a couple of times.
I listen back to all the podcasts I do. It's weird.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bit indulgent.
It is. Yeah.
I can't do it, but
If only I could mute your guys' voices and just listen to mine.
That'd
So
be
much
a day.
truth in
So
that.
much
Real talk. Thank you, man. Legend.
Thanks, Luke.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks.
Take us out, Joe.
Oh, thanks for tuning in today, fam. 2-part series with Luke Tulloch. Big shout out to our boy Tree from Panavore Cafe in Pagewood.
Oh, Tree.
Supplinus. You know Tree?
Yeah. I used to train Tree.
Holy fuck, you changed.
Yeah.
Were you his powerlifting coach?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he trains.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, okay. He still talks about those times.
That's awesome, man.
And
He's a cool guy.
He's a fucking cool guy, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Super cool guy.
Yeah, he supplies the coffee for our show.
Oh, wicked.
And he supplies us every week, and he trains here at the gym. And Panavore's a sick little cafe down in Pagewood. They do a delicious egg sandwich with ham and cheese and a homemade chili sauce that is exceptional.
Cold trip's great.
If it fits your macros. Yeah, we sell the cold drip here at the gym. But find us on Instagram at Jungle Brothers Movement, and you can find us online, junglebrothers.com. If you got any questions, hit us up. And if you like the show, please give us an epic rating and just tell one person about it. Let them know, because it's good information. We'd like to spread it out there, and it helps us survive. Thanks, fam. Catch you guys next time.
Thank you.
See ya.